Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Pod Save the Youth. I'm your host, David Seaton. This week, we're going to be talking to the amazing state auditor of Massachusetts, Auditor DiZoglio. And we have our other co-hosts this week on the podcast, Meera. Would you like to give an introduction?
My name is Meera. I'm one of the other co-hosts on Pod Save the Youth. I am very involved in activism and youth advocacy. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today and to be able to talk to you both.
And Auditor DiZoglio.
It is great to see you both virtually. Though I do wish we were in person sitting around because it is lovely outside. And would like to be outside enjoying some of that sunshine, which is exactly what our office is trying to spread across state government right now, spreading some sunshine.
Yeah, so to start off, we're just going to be discussing some of the low levels of political trust among youth. According to a Gallup poll, members of Gen Z have the lowest levels of trust in Congress, the news, the presidency, and large technology companies. And less than 1/4 of the members of Gen Z trust the American criminal justice system. So, do we agree with these numbers, and what institutional decisions do you both think have led to this generational lack of trust?
Yeah, and I'm gonna approach these questions from the perspective of just my role as state auditor, because I think that, we can certainly talk about these things from a very big sort of vantage point, but I do want to hone in on how I'm viewing these things from my role as state auditor in the state of Massachusetts. And I can say regarding trust in public government, or trust in just public officials, in government, in the system overall, it completely makes sense to me that not just Gen Z, but folks across the board would have, a lack of trust in their state government in particular right now, which is what I've been seeing on a day-to-day basis in the work that I do, traveling the state of Massachusetts, because a lot of the decisions that are made are done outside of the view of the public, and that creates a natural suspicion, right? I took a nonverbal communications class actually at Wellesley College, Meera, where you are right now, and one of the things that was brought up to us was, when you put your hands behind your back, even if you don't have anything in your hands that are behind your back, what is the natural inclination of people to think when they're looking at you? If you're standing there talking to them, but your hands are behind your back like this, right? They might be kind of like, what do you have back there, right? What's going on back there? So it's important to let people know, nothing. There's nothing going on, and I'm just having a conversation with you, and there is nothing to hide. Right now in state government, what we have is a state legislature, for example, right? A state Senate and a House of Representatives who are led by officials who, while they might be good on certain fronts regarding certain policies, regarding the issue of transparency, really are not stepping up as folks really want them to, regarding showing us what is actually happening regarding our taxpayer dollars, processes and procedures. A lot of these conversations about legislation that's able to be passed in the middle of the night with no roll call, committee votes that are taking place on important issues, how our budget is actually funded, how those decisions get made. A lot of those conversations and a lot of that work is being done like this, right? So the natural inclination of humans is to look and say, what do you got going on back there? And because they haven't sat there and said, here you go, here's what we're doing, and showed folks what's going on, that continues, that distrust continues, and it's going to continue until folks who are leading in these governmental positions actually put on the table for all to see what they're talking about, what they're working on, and the ways in which they're working on those issues that are important to us, so that we can be a part of the process instead of constantly having to guess how that process is working. And that's the case for people, regardless of how conservative you might be, how liberal or progressive you might be. That's something across the board that's impacting people. And that's one of the reasons why folks are getting fed up with the party system as well, is because they don't see folks on either side necessarily taking the full lead on these issues to, open up the doors, let the people in, and let the sun shine on what's really happening.
So one of the things that can help with making youth trust the government more is actually holding leaders accountable when they do things the wrong way, right? And one of the most prominent examples of this recently was Thursday, where Trump was convicted of 34 felony counts for falsifying business records to unlawfully interfere with the 2016 election. This represents the first time in American history that a former president has ever been charged with a felony. Auditor DiZoglio, you have been absolutely involved in trying to consistently make clear that no state official in Massachusetts should be ever held to a higher standard than the general public, ever be above the law. So I'll ask you, just from a legal standpoint and your standpoint as a state auditor, what is the significance of this Trump case to you in terms of demonstrating that no public official, including the highest office holder in the country, is above the law?
Yeah, I mean, the law needs to be applied equitably, right? And it doesn't matter how rich somebody is, or how powerful that individual is, whether it's him, whether it's someone else. It is something where, obviously we want to make sure it's being applied equitably and fairly, and that, all people are subject to those same rules, regulations, laws in general that go across the board. I think regarding, this upcoming election, that people are looking to their elected leaders, like you're saying, with a question about, can we trust you? Can we trust you to make the right decisions? Can we trust you to follow the same laws that you expect the rest of us to follow? Can we trust you to support and uphold, the things that are even put in place to hold you accountable? Are you going to abide by those things, or are you going to selectively choose to apply the law, based on whether or not it makes sense for you politically at the time, right? So I think that, to add to your conversation, I will be supporting the Democratic nominee, obviously, in this election. But what I can say regarding folks across the board, as it pertains to just this aspect of being found guilty and all the different counts and all these things that have been occurring very publicly, is, these are the things that lend to that mistrust in government, is that our elected officials are sometimes operating at a standard, or those who want to be elected, seem to think that they should be held to a different standard because of who they are, because of the power that they've wielded, or because of how much money they have, that the law doesn't necessarily need to apply to them. And, that needs to change. And I think that not just Generation Z, as you keep talking about, because I know that that's, a lot of this podcast, right? But everybody, younger people, older people, everybody's concerned that the folks that we're electing to office, especially higher office, they're concerned with making sure that they're actually going to do right by those of us who need a voice, who need to be able to gain some faith in our elected officials again. And, unfortunately, at this higher level right now, we're seeing these types of things occur like something out of a movie. And it's really, really a scary time. So this upcoming election is incredibly important. And we need to make sure that we are going to that ballot box, and that, we are voting to support our values of transparency, accountability, and equity and accessibility, right, to what's happening in our state government. And that needs to happen up and down the ballot box, whether it be at the federal level, whether it be at the state level, or the county level, right? And on these ballot questions that we've been working on as well. Support issues that support our values, and make sure that we're going and actually voting. Yes, your vote does count. Yes, it does. And don't let anybody tell you differently. I have seen elections where folks have won or lost by a single vote in elections where people will say, oh, my vote doesn't really count, and it's all, it's all a sham, or it's all this or that, with folks who are skeptics, I understand the skepticism, but your vote actually does count. Again, I have people that I know personally who have won and lost elections on a single vote. So your vote counts, and make sure you go and you let your voice be heard on what you think about these things in November.
In terms of running a campaign, one thing that erodes trust, specifically among youth, is when candidates don't seem to live up to the promises that they've made on the campaign trail. And we can see that right now. Currently, a lot of young voters do feel like the Biden campaign overpromised and underdelivered over Biden's first term in office, according to NBC News. So how do you decide what promises to make to voters on the campaign trail without knowing what you'll be able to deliver upon once in office?
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of candidates think about their aspirations should they be in office, and make a lot of commitments and promises instead of setting forth a set of aspirational goals that they will outline, where, they can talk about how, if they are given the resources, and, they're going to push for different things, talking about it in that manner, rather than saying, they promised to do this, they promised to do that, 1000% this is going to happen. I think that would help to boost a little bit more confidence in some of the statements that are made. I'll actually talk to my team quite often, and they'll help with different statements that we'll put out, and then I'll look at it and review it, and I will go through and edit it a lot of times where I do catch it, to say, we're not stating that we are doing this, or we will do X, Y, and Z specifically, because I can't guarantee that is going to turn out that way necessarily. I can guarantee that I'm going to be working towards that goal, and I'm going to be doing so very publicly, but I can't determine the outcome before I've gotten there, right? It's like you saying, I promised to get an A+ on my exam, and I am committing to you that it will be an A+. Now, you could put in all of the effort that you want to put into getting that A+, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of different factors that determine whether or not you actually get that grade, right? So you can say all day long, well, I worked hard, I did everything, and my work to me was an A+, and I put in all the effort. But the people that are looking at the grade at the end of the day are saying, well, you lied to us. You lied to us. You said you're going to get an A+, and you didn't get an A+. So that's a lie. And now we don't trust you, right? Because you promised one thing, and what you gave us was an A-. And you can talk all day long about how, well, you tried and you fought for it and whatever. So I would say that I think the way, and I've been learning, this as an elected official. Certainly, there are no perfect humans in the way that we converse about different topics, but I have been learning progress, not perfection, to make sure that the way that I'm talking about things, that I am talking about my fight for certain values, my fight for certain causes, that I am not going to be letting up as it pertains to certain issues and things that I have committed to fight for. And then I have made statements regarding things that I will do if elected, right? Now, I can't guarantee that they will be done as I prefer them to be done because of other people's lack of cooperation, but I can still do my part. For example, when I was talking on the campaign trail about auditing the state legislature, it is law right now that the legislature is able to be audited by my office. We have 117 other times that our state legislature has been audited by our office that we've put out there to the general public to view. And when I was running my campaign, in the face of a lot of backlash, I was saying, look, this is the right thing to do. The legislature needs to get audited about how they're spending our tax dollars, like every other state entity is audited. A lot of people that are in positions of power didn't like that I was saying that, but I kept saying, I will do this, I will do this. Well, now I'm in the office of state auditor, and I am conducting an audit of the state legislature, but they are pushing back on my audit and they are not cooperating. So that audit is not going to be as robust and filled with the information that I hope it will be filled with, but we're still doing the audit anyways. And I am pushing for the ballot question to audit the state legislature in November. That would afford us the opportunity to do our jobs with access to all the information that we need in order to be able to do the work that the taxpayers want us to do to promote transparency and accountability. But it kind of is a segue between, you know, these campaign promises that we make and how, you know, folks could get themselves into trouble down the line if they can't deliver on their promises. I think it's important to talk about doing the things that are within our power to do while also, you know, being transparent to people about some of the limitations that might exist on your commitments. I will do this. I can't control what they do, however. And here's what we need to do in order to try to fix this challenge over here. And that takes communication. It takes keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening in our communities. And it takes making sure that you're allowing feedback and working with the activists and working with folks who care about these things to try to navigate paths forward, right? Instead of just saying, oh, well, you know, I tried to do this, they wouldn't cooperate, or such and such was an issue, so we didn't do anything, right? That's where people can lose faith in the system and lose faith in what people promise and commit to, is when, you know, one thing is said, another thing is done, and then there's really no explanation or joining of forces to try to find a path forward around the roadblocks that can be put up during the course of action.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of tying those two together, one example of people certainly not, elected officials certainly not living up to their promises on the campaign trail takes place very often, far too often in Massachusetts, where the past, not consecutively the past 3 House speakers, but 3 recent Massachusetts State House speakers have faced felony charges for government corruption in their offices. This is, you know, a culture in the state legislature right now that excuses certain officials in high positions of power of committing acts of corruption against the Massachusetts residents that are just trying to have their policies that they voted for enacted and reflected in the policymakers that they're supposed to have elected to serve them.
Yeah, David, I will add to your commentary that it's interesting, and I'm not saying it's causal, but there is a correlation between when the audits of the House of Representatives stopped happening and when the indictments started occurring. So audits of the state legislature always happened throughout history until speakers started getting indicted. Those audits stopped happening, and then we saw 3 speakers get indicted, right? So I'm not suggesting that was the cause of any of this, but I am saying that, you know, there was a lack of accountability, and at that same time where there was pushback against accountability, we saw all of these challenges occur. So, you know, we really need to make sure that we are calling out a lot of these different things that we're seeing and highlighting the fact that accountability is a good thing, right? A lot of state entities get nervous when the Office of State Auditor comes in because, you know, they're nervous that we might find something wrong. And I have to say, generally speaking, we're going to find something that's wrong, right? I mean, we go in to identify challenges and gaps and then help you to fix that, right? But it's not this awful thing just because we identify things that are wrong. You know, we are actually reviewed by the National Association of State Auditors at the federal level. They come in, they look at our process, they identify issues and challenges in my office that we need to fix. And when they do, it's actually a welcome thing that we look and say, man, you know, hey, thank you so much. We're so glad you brought this fresh perspective in, because we're working every day, and it's like reading a paper that you wrote, right? And you ask a friend or a classmate or somebody or a TA to review the paper for you, to just catch everything, because you read sometimes what you want to see, right? Like you'll read the sentence and you'll read it the way it's in your mind you want it to read. somebody else will look at it and be like, oh no, it's there, not there, right? THER, not THEIR, right? And they'll see like those discrepancies and you're like, oh my gosh, like I read this 1,000 times. I can't believe I missed that. And it's because you're too close to it, right? So you can't see the bigger picture and you need a fresh pair of eyes, right? Every once in a while to just help you to see things that you weren't seeing so that you can have the best result, right? And that's what the Office of State Auditor exists to do, to help our state agencies to be the best that they can be, to better perform, to better serve residents across the Commonwealth. And, you know, some entities in state government understand that and they welcome the audit reports. Even if we find issues, they'll say, thank you so much. We're getting to work on these things right now. Wow, it's been great to have you in here and show us where we can do better and we're going to get to work. And then there's other state entities, there are other state entities who will, you know, unfortunately, like the legislature, push back and say, we don't want you to see anything regarding how we're spending our tax dollars, anything regarding our processes and procedures. We're above the law, we're above the rules. And, you know, too bad for you. And it's disappointing when that happens because it's a missed opportunity to make government work to the best of its ability to better serve everyday people like those, you know, in the communities that we all work and live in.
Absolutely. Yeah, right now, as you said, Speaker Ron Mariano has refused to turn over documents that are important for the residents of Massachusetts to see how their tax dollars are actually being spent in state policy to your office. So what do you think it means that that they're refusing to disclose these documents? Is there something that they're trying to hide? Because I think that's kind of
well,
what
one
it
has
looks
to question, right? And it's unfortunate that I do believe, you know, sure, it does seem that way. Because if there was nothing to hide, why wouldn't you just comply with the same type of audit that every other state entity is willing to comply with? Sure, we could find some challenges, but if there's nothing really bad happening, then why not just allow us to go in, identify those challenges, and work together with us to fix those challenges that we identify so that we can all do better, right? That's the way that it's supposed to work. We provide a service. We are not the FBI. I do not have the right to go in, contrary to popular belief by some legislative leaders who I think, you know, might be scared that this is going to grant me the authority to go in and raid their cell phones or something. I don't have that type of authority. I can't go in and toss desks and, you know, start demanding random pieces of information that have to do with them personally. We go in and we audit process and procedures and how taxpayer dollars are being spent. And that has to be done in accordance with very strict regulations from the federal level that we are governed by. And, you know, we're just looking to do our jobs and to shine a light on how to make government work better. And when folks push back the way that the Speaker and Senate President are pushing back, we can't help but wonder, what are you so afraid of us seeing and then showing to the taxpayers? What is it that you are hiding? Like I said at the beginning of this conversation, you know, it's like your hands are right here. We can see there's nothing to hide. But if you say, no, I will absolutely not bring my hands out from behind my back, it is the natural inclination of all of us to say, show us what you got going on back there. We want to see. We want to see. If it's nothing bad, just show us, right? So that's how our office is operating right now. If you have nothing to hide, let us go in and do our jobs. Let us look at, you know, the receipts that you're keeping or not keeping regarding the expenditures that you're making using our tax dollars and show that to the taxpayer so that we can make sure that our tax dollars are being spent appropriately. We just want some accountability and transparency, right? And I don't think that that's too much to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we get to the end of this conversation, I'm just going to turn it over to Meera again to talk about the consequences of eroded trust in government.
When voters don't know how their government works and they see it as ineffective, they are less likely to participate in it through voting, which, similar to what you said, according to Princeton University, voters who see establishment political officials, as corrupt and ineffective, are also more prone to elect outsider authoritarian leaders that erode democracy. So, what do you see as the most significant consequence of a lack of government trust among citizens born out of a lack of government accountability?
Folks don't want to then participate in the process by going to vote. They get tired, they detach and say, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this. I hate politics. I hate government. And they will go ahead and become disenfranchised because of being demoralized about the way that things are going. And the state house is in the state legislature being governed in much more of a dictatorial style of governance, and not a democratic style of governance. We are supposed to have a democratic process where people are heard and there's a system of shared leadership. And the decisions that are made in our state legislature right now are very authoritarian. They are very dictatorial. And it's really, really, really something that is having a negative impact on the voters who feel like, what's the point, right? What's the point? We keep trying. I mean, I'll talk to legislators that think, what's the point? And they're getting demoralized. I remember being a legislator myself and talking about how I was demoralized as a senator and talking about how my staff were demoralized and other people's staff were demoralized because we were feeling like we were banging our heads up against a wall for years at a time, trying to be heard and trying to get access to just being able to participate in the conversation around the decisions that were being made and being denied that opportunity. And, you know, that is something that I think really does hurt the general public in you know, when we think about people wanting to go to the polls and wanting to vote and wanting to play an active role in their government. You know, when we talk about even like voting in these elections and stuff, a lot of folks will say, what's the point, right? So we need to make sure that we are working incredibly hard day and night on increasing the public's trust by increasing transparency, accountability, and accessibility across the board as much as is possible, to help to reinstill and reinstate that faith and that trust in government that we know people need in order to continue to be actively engaged in the process. Otherwise, you know, we risk being subject to a tyrannical government. And I know a lot of people think, well, we live in Massachusetts. Oh, it's so progressive here. Not in our state legislature, not in the system of governance, not in the way that decisions are made. We have decisions getting made up on Beacon Hill that are done under a cloak of darkness in the middle of the night with no public hearing that we'll hear about after the fact. That's not democracy. That's not democracy at all. That is a tyrannical style of governance. And we are really, really in danger in Massachusetts of that only growing if we don't push back as hard as possible right now. We have an opportunity, I think, you know, in this upcoming November ballot question regarding auditing the legislature to make a dent as it pertains to increasing transparency and accountability up on Beacon Hill, to providing some increased oversight, to make sure that our legislators know that they're going to be held to the same standard as everybody else and that the general public is watching. You know, a lot of people will say that are opposing what we're doing that they don't, you know, they don't want our Office of State Auditor to have the power to do the audits that we're looking to do because that would cause some sort of disruption on Beacon Hill. You know, my answer to that is, you know, that disruption is absolutely imperative right now. We need to disrupt what's going on Beacon Hill. What's happening on Beacon Hill is 1000% unacceptable. We can't allow this system of governance to continue unchecked. It is hurting everyday people in our communities who feel like they don't have a voice, who are being disenfranchised from the system. It's unacceptable. So we need to disrupt. And any power you give to the state auditor's office, by the way, that is power that you are giving to the people of the Commonwealth. I remind folks, unlike the legislature, my office is subject to the public records law. So when we get information from the legislature, that knowledge and information we gather during those audits, it's not me who becomes more powerful. It's the people that elect me that get more powerful because I am just a conduit of that information getting back to the general public. Subject to the public records law, when we get that information in an audit, I can't hold on to that and then say, well, I'm just keeping this information to make myself more powerful. No, I'm a conduit. That information comes from the legislature, goes through me, and goes back to all of you, the tax-paying residents of the Commonwealth, who just want to know how your tax dollars are being spent. So that's why when we talk about our office, we say we are the people's auditor. The people's auditor, because we don't audit you, we audit the government for you, and then we give that information back to you. Knowledge is power, and power belongs to the people of the Commonwealth.
Thank you so much. We have one more question just to close off. So what is your pitch for young people who are considering running for office or pursuing careers in public service?
We need your voice. We need your voice. Don't let anybody tell you that you are too young to share your opinion, or that you don't know what you're doing, or you lack the knowledge or whatever. Look, I'm the youngest constitutional officer. I'm 40 years old. I'm turning 41 tomorrow. Another day, another gray. That's what they say.
Happy birthday.
We'll create a rhyme for you guys with this. Thank you very much, David. But I will tell you, even in my 40s, I have people looking down their nose at me and saying, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You need to get schooled. You know, it's the most patronizing, demeaning type of remarks that I've heard, you know, even in my 40s, that I can't even express to you how often I've heard people tell me, you know, that I don't know what I'm talking about and somebody else needs to educate me and whatever, right? Guess what? I know in my heart that I'm advocating for something that I feel is a need in our communities. And no, I might not know every single thing about every single thing, but I do know a few things, and those things that I do know, I'm going to advocate for. And I'm going to advocate as strongly as possible for those things. I feel it in my soul that I need to advocate for those things. And young people, when you feel that calling, that burning desire that you need to say something, then say something and don't be afraid to say it. You know, in fact, the more afraid you are to say it, maybe the more necessary it is that you need to say it. You know, young people, we need your voices and we need you to have a seat at the table. And, you know, the way that we've been doing things all this time hasn't been working. That's why we're in a housing crisis. That's why we're in a transportation crisis. That's why we're in a mental health crisis. That's why we're in a climate crisis, right? So if you don't step up and get involved in these conversations and let your voices be heard, then what's going to happen is the same thing that's been happening, because the same people are going to be the same ones talking and the same ones controlling the conversation. And we won't see any changes. The definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. We can't allow the same thing to keep happening again and again and again, but expect things to change magically, right? So it is time for bold, meaningful change where we are doing things differently than our predecessors, not because we don't have respect for them, but because we view things from a different perspective, and we've been able to look at things in a different way and see some gaps that maybe they didn't see. Maybe they identified these gaps, and that's great. And then we come in as the newer generation, and then you come in as the newer generation, and you identify other gaps and other ways to do things. All of those conversations are important. One's not better than the other. It's just that what's happening is, younger people a lot of times get disenfranchised because they feel like no one's listening and they feel like they're being talked down to. And I get it, trust me, because I've experienced it myself. So don't let people talk down to you. Your voice matters. Find a way to navigate some of those tougher conversations. Speak the truth. Speak the truth in love. And I'll end with this. It's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. It's, as we press on for justice, be sure to move with dignity and discipline, using only the weapon of love. I hope that speaks to you today as much as it spoke to me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Auditor DiZoglio, for joining us today. It was great to have you. And thank you, Meera, for joining as our co-host. See you next week.